Okay, so if many of you probably own a Rovio and you've experienced the problem with Rovio deviating to one side, or maybe having one wheel that continuously spins after you've given a command, you know, it's obviously very aggravating, and we all know the fact that Wowwee no longer does support the Rovio. They will not give you any spare parts for it, which is quite disappointing. But the good news is, a lot of the things that can go wrong with this bot actually can be fixed at home fairly easily if you have, you know, just some minimal soldering skills. One of the foremost things that breaks on this robot is the fact that the sensors go out quite commonly that encode how many times the wheels have turned. You know, as they degrade or go out, what you'll notice is the robot will tend to deviate to one side or the other. And the reason that is because the programming of the bot basically detects how many times the wheel is turned on one side based on impulses from the IR encoders that are for each wheel. And if it's not detecting the signal from that encoder, then it will run that wheel faster and faster and faster, and you'll notice that your Rovio deviates to the opposite side. So if the sensor on the right front wheel is bad, then you'll notice your Rovio turns to the left and the right wheel spins way faster than it should, and that's because the motor controller thinks that the right wheel is not spinning fast enough. So really, you know, Rovio depends very much on the sensors to drive straight, you know, and to be able to navigate properly. It needs to know how many times the wheels have actually turned. So the good news is I've actually been able to replace the defective sensors myself, apart from Wowwee's help. All you need, obviously, is just one of these old computer trackball mice. Now, what's nice about these things is the old mice that had a trackball, they have these rollers inside that are driven by the trackball, but on the circuit board you'll notice that there's an IR sensor and an IR LED, just like there is inside of Rovio. You kind of have to, once you take one of the encoders out of Rovio, you have to really kind of tease that black cover off, but you'll notice on the inside there's an IR sensor and an IR LED. And you'll find the exact setup inside of one of these old serial mice that have a trackball inside them. You know, in this particular case, this was just an old Microsoft serial mouse. Actually, no, this is a PS2 mouse. What am I saying? But anyhow, I was able to harvest the sensor and the IR LED out of the mouse and swap it directly into Rovio, and soldered them onto Rovio's sensor board, and it appears that it successfully does work almost like a factory swap. Obviously some soldering skills are required to do this, but you can get your Rovio going again just by taking parts out of one of these old ball mice and soldering them onto the board. And what was nice, the polarity and everything was already properly lined up, because the mouse has an exact same type of setup inside of it with an IR LED opposite the sensor, and obviously the disc that was inside the mouse very much, you can see, is just like what Rovio has, very same type of system. So it's just a matter of soldering the new components onto the board, and this will actually work. It's optional whether or not you want to put the black plastic cover on or not. It works with or without it. But I will note, if you go through this procedure and you notice it's still not working, it may be because you don't have the sensor and the IR LED aligned properly with each other. I had to, after I worked with it, I was thinking, oh man, it's not working still. But actually, you just have to kind of play around with the alignment, bend them in or out towards each other a little bit, and make sure that the little dome on the inside of the LED is actually oriented towards the windows and pointing through the windows in that disc. A neat little trick you can do if you want to actually know that the IR LED is working and it has power. I'm going to kill the lights in here just a second. Turn Rovio on. Now, the human eye cannot see infrared radiation. It's invisible to our visual system. However, a digital camera can see IR radiation, and it'll look to your camera like a bright little dot. You see that right there? That dim little light there, that actually is the IR LED glowing. My eye is not capable of seeing that, but this digital camera can. So, turn on the lights here. That's one way you can make sure that at least the IR LED is working, and it's also a great method to determine whether or not either the sensor or the LED itself is bad. So that's pretty much it. So now we're gonna screw this back down here. I'm gonna screw the board back down into Rovio here, and let's give him a test drive, see if this actually works. I just finished this. Like I said, I've already done this with the rear sensor, and it did work. So looks like I also was overdue to have one of the front encoders replaced too. So let's just see what happens. If this was successful, Rovio will drive across my floor without having to steer one way or the other. It should drive straight. So let's launch Rovio's interface. So I'm starting with a drive forward command, and as you can see, Rovio drives straight without deviating either way. Now, without the input of either one of the sensors, the right wheel would continue to spin. So I'm going to issue one of the blue dot turn commands, and as you can see, Rovio turns and the wheels stop just like they're supposed to. So this is all confirmation that the new sensor is actually working. So instead of buying a new Rovio, you can fix the one that you've got. If you buy another one, it's going to develop the same problem, but it's nice to know that really everything you need is all right here inside an old computer mouse. Everything you need to get Rovio back and working just like you did the day you came out of the box. I will also, before I conclude this tutorial, I will also mention to you, before you jump the gun on trying to fix the sensors, I will mention that the electric motors in Rovio also tend to go bad. It's apparent Wowwee tried to do a lot to keep the cost down in this robot and used fairly cheap components, but instead of just getting mad about that, we can complain our heads off, or we can just replace things that are very easy to get our hands on at any hobby store. So if you notice your Rovio is turning to one side, before you get into ripping out the sensors or trying to test that, you can do the very simple task of just switching the sensors right to left and change the jumpers, from the right one to the left one and vice versa on the main board, and just see what happens. If Rovio, was turning left before and then swapping the sensors, now he turns the other way, opposite the way he was turning before, then that tells you that you actually do have a bad sensor. But if Rovio, after swapping your right and left sensors the same, he still curves the same way he was before, then that tells you that the motor actually was bad. So and I found in my case already 2 of the motors that failed, the brushes had gone bad. So you can find motors like Rovio has at any store, any hobby store really. I found a small kit with like a little electric gearbox for kids to put together, and it had, at our local hobby store, and that had exactly the right parts to actually fix one of Rovio's motors. What you can do is just take the backing off of one of the motors and then put the new brushes in and use the same armature, same magnet and casing that you had before, and that actually has worked very well in this case. So really, other than that, there's not much else that can go wrong with Rovio, other than the gears are probably going to wear out. But fixing the motors and fixing the IR sensors is most certainly not beyond the scope of what the average person can do at home that's got, you know, moderate or decent soldering skills. So anyhow, that concludes our time here today. Hopefully my tutorials helped you all and you'll be able to get your Rovio working again. It really is not that hard to fix these types of problems as they come up. You just kind of have to be a good diagnostician and go through the steps. But it's really nice to be able to fix something and avoid, you know, trying to spend more money on something. You might even be able to use some old junk you've got sitting around at home to get this working again. So anyhow, that's it for today, and if I have anything else for you guys, I'll put it up.